Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. We will give it another couple of minutes before we start the presentation just to let others join as well. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. We'll just wait for one more minute to let others join before we kickstart today's webinar. Thank you very much. A warm welcome to everyone joining us to discuss a topic which is very relevant for the real estate sector. My name is Swapnil Pillai, and I'm the Associate Director for Research at Savills, and I'm also the host for today's webinar. Now, the built environment or the real estate sector is an integral component of all economic activities. Therefore, it plays a crucial role in addressing climate change issues. Now, we will ask our questions to our panel of experts to understand what changes they are seeing across the real estate sector. But let us look at how and why sustainability across the real estate sector is very important and why the real estate sector needs to collectively address sustainability issues across its value chain. Now, climate change is no longer a speculative topic or discussion. It is very much real and noticeable. We have recorded a significant increase, unfortunately, in the number of natural disasters such as landslides, floods, as well as extreme weather conditions globally over the last 2 decades. Only last year, we recorded the sixth hottest year on record, and it is projected that global cities with large populations will continue to see a significant increase in daily average temperature over the next few years. Now, while the environmental impact of climate change is no doubt significant, it is estimated that the global economy loses close to $900 billion annually just because of climate change related issues. Now, the real estate sector, because of its close links with other industries and sectors, plays a crucial role in addressing climate related challenges. As a sector, it directly contributes more than 40% of global carbon emissions due to the built environment as well as the operational aspects of the real estate sector. Some of the major cities globally are not well equipped to handle any sort of climate related changes on its built environment. This chart is from a recent article in a flagship report called Impacts, wherein we look at global cities and we try to understand how resilient they are to future climate changes. Now, apart from a handful of cities such as Berlin, Toronto, and Paris, most of the other cities are not very well equipped to handle any sort of changes brought upon by climate change. Cities in the Middle East, such as Dubai, Cairo, and others, are definitely in the bottom ranking when it comes to handling climate related issues and challenges. And it is very important that we look at how this could be addressed because there is a significant quantum of upcoming supply or built environment that is likely to be brought online in the next few years across the Middle East region. Just in Saudi Arabia, there is close to $1.2 trillion worth of real estate development projects that are likely to be launched till 2030. And across UAE, this number is close to $800 billion. So it is very important that we look at how real estate sector could be built sustainability so that we address challenges brought about by climate change. To discuss these and how our occupiers and landlords addressing climate related changes, I'm very pleased to be joined by our panel of experts today. We have with us Dr. Kat Martindale. She is the head of ESG research for Savills Earth. She's based out of our London office, and she has more than 20 years of experience across US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Just for the benefit of the audience on the call today, Savills Earth is a bespoke advisory team based out of a London office, which has a team of experts that deal day in, day out with sustainability related issues across the built environment. We also have with us Mr. Richard Paul. Mr. Richard is the head of professional services for Savills in the Middle East. As a senior member of the Middle Eastern Management Board, he handles valuations, strategic advisory, as well as research for Savills across the region, and is best placed to tell us more about existing and emerging trends across the real estate sector. We also have with us Paula Walsh. Paula is a thought leader and a spokesperson across the real estate sector in the region. She is the head of transactional services for Savills and is based out of Dubai. And she deals with both global and well as local clients on a daily basis, trying to understand their occupier requirements across the corporate office space. Last but not the least, I'm also pleased to be joined by Luke Tipp. Luke is an associate in our industrial and logistics team. As a key member of the industrial and logistics team, he has worked and advised on various high-profile transactions across the industrial sectors for clients in the e-commerce, industrial, manufacturing, and vertical farming sector. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Really lovely to have you with us this morning. My first question, Kat, is to you. As an industry, we are actually seeing collective efforts and movement towards sustainability, and the real estate sector is not far behind. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the changes that you're seeing at a global level in terms of sustainable practices and policy level changes?
Yeah, good morning. I think it's very interesting that we have such a broad range of questions and panelists this morning. Globally, I think we're seeing an increased demand for green energy, and that is reflected in innovative policies. Less so in the UK. We've got a bit of a difficult situation at the moment, but we'll see where that goes towards the end of the year. But the US Inflation Reduction Act contains $369 billion worth of climate change programs. We're also seeing the price of green energy coming down, in part because it's more available and the technology is becoming cheaper. The second aspect I think that's really important is in construction, so the innovation in materials, working towards more environmentally sustainable concrete options, and also retrofitting rather than demolishing and rebuild. At a larger level in the city, there's a great deal of interest and focus on flood prevention measures, and also urban cooling, so lots of planting. Paris has been particularly innovative in terms of introducing new legislation specifying that all new buildings must have either green roofs or solar panels. And then in Singapore, lots of rooftop farming. They don't have a great deal of arable land, so that's another good way of addressing carbon impact of food production and imports into the city-state. And I think finally, one of the big trends is identifying clear and transparent data to ensure that what we have is usable data for certification regulation, and also ensuring that all sustainable investments are genuinely sustainable and avoiding greenwashing.
Thank you very much for that, Kat. I think it's very, very interesting to hear what is being done at a global level. Now, Richard, I think from a real estate perspective, residential is definitely one of the biggest components for components of the real estate landscape globally and here in the region as well. What are you seeing from a residential perspective? Have you seen ESG responsibilities being integrated into the residential sector?
Yeah, good morning, Swapnil, and welcome to everybody joining the call this morning. Yeah, look, I think to date, there have been, in terms of optional supply now, there's been limited projects and schemes that have adopted a focused environmental play as part of their development. However, that's certainly changing. And those developers that have done that have gained notoriety and success for doing so. I guess a good example that have accomplished that is the sustainable city schemes that we've seen, and now they're available in schemes in Dubai and Sharjah and Abu Dhabi, which very much put sustainability not just in the name but also into practice in the forefront of their schemes. And examples of some of the things that they've implemented are solar paneling embedded into the parking structures, which have enabled residents to save on energy bills up to 50% in some cases. That's become, as you can imagine, a very significant selling point to tenants and their occupiers. The developments have implemented high efficiency water reduction systems, also a recycling plant that treats wastewater and reuses it for irrigation purposes. Within the schemes, most of them all are promoting battery charged buggies and bikes that residents can use in getting around. And the actual structures themselves are utilized using recycled materials and locally sourced materials as well to build the structures. Now, to be fair, I know you mentioned ESG. To be fair, most of the newly launched communities that we're seeing across the Emirates are very much putting the S of ESG, the social variable and the community aspect of a scheme at the forefront of their offering. Most schemes these days in the UAE particularly have communal green spines, outdoor space. Most features playgrounds, playing fields, lakes, pools, dedicated cycling and jogging tracks, amongst other social features. As well as then, making it somewhat self-contained. So community schools, local retail offering and fitness centers that hopefully then reduce the travel requirement of its residents to go other places in their cars and keep it more local. But for me, the focus on sustainability and environmental conscious products is a forced market dynamic. So purchasers want to hear about it and they want to experience it. And so bringing in compulsory national building protocols is one thing, and that's definitely a good thing. But the developers need to incorporate these variables now as a base offering, to remain relevant and competitive going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Richard. And I think it's a very important point that you mentioned, that in this part of the world, we have a lot of integrated developments which have schools, retail and offices within themselves, and which that brings me to my next question, which is to Paula. Paula, you speak to global clients on a daily basis. You speak to clients based out of London, New York. What are you hearing from them? Is there a general push towards more greener assets? Is that purely from the global corporates, or are you seeing a mix of both global as well as local corporates? What's the feeler that you're getting?
Yeah, thanks, Swapnil. Yes, definitely. The answer is yes, that we're seeing the requirement for green buildings, for ESG and sustainability factors very much at the forefront of certainly most of our international corporate occupiers' agendas. And regionally too. I think, however, one of the challenges that we've got in our markets here is that only a relatively small percentage of the grade A and grade B commercial office stock is indeed rated, which gives our clients a challenge. In that they would very much like to shortlist space that has a lead rating, predominantly in this region. However, the availability of that space is more difficult in our markets. I think it's well documented that we have a high demand, particularly here in the UAE, and a low supply at this point of good quality office stock. So it's a difficult dynamic. The desire is certainly there, but the supply is very limited.
Fair enough, and I think that is something that we have observed in our report as well, which is releasing very soon on ESG, wherein we looked at the Dubai office stock and we saw that out of the 112 million square feet that is available, maybe less than 20% is only green certified from that perspective. Interesting. So moving on to Luke. Now, Luke, industrial sector, it was coined as beds and sheds, and it has been one of the most active sectors throughout the pandemic and even before that. What are you seeing from an industrial occupier perspective? Are you seeing a lot more demand for sustainable assets? There's definitely a lot more interest from global funds to invest in sustainable assets, but are you seeing occupiers kind of moving towards that?
Yes, certainly. So it starts more with the new development. So the new development coming in all have provisions for greener buildings. So that means that they have provisions, base build specifications that support solar, so the roofing and foundation support that thing, which then the occupiers come in and they can secure a solar contract, which gives them greener energy as well as better energy efficiencies.
Fair enough. And unlike other sectors, I think industrial, to a certain extent, is it fair to say that it is easier to retrofit and build something relatively more ESG compliant because it takes a shorter period of time? Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing a lot more retrofitting happening across developments?
I don't think retrofitting is ever easy, but it's a little bit easier in terms of the mechanics of it, because industrial buildings are typically 1 or 2 stories. But again, it does depend on the base build of those ones. So for instance, if it's getting into foundations and the MEP works, these can sometimes be the most expensive to then support the water recycling initiatives and the energy saving. But there are a few quick wins in terms of, certainly in the climate of the Middle East, is all to do with insulation. When with that, it becomes the better insulation that's come to the market means there's a better energy use and efficiencies.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. Now, Richard, I would like to come back to you because residential is such an interesting and a growing topic. You mentioned about the social element being integrated across the developments, but from your perspective, are you seeing developers look at the overall ESG as a variable that they need to focus on for their upcoming developments? Any examples that you can share?
I can, and yeah, in a word, yes, they are in a substantial way, particularly in the last couple of years, in certain sectors in the market. So at Savills, we advise on a significant amount of luxury and prime residential products across the region. And what stood out for me is the growing focus to incorporate environmental and social variables as key pillars into the thematic experience of the scheme itself. And it's abundantly clear for me in that sort of luxury and prime market that health is the new wealth. Now, pre-COVID, at the back of a lot of development brochures, after all the sort of the glitzy renders and the internal shots and the external facade and the views, maybe you would have a section at the back of the brochure on amenities, which would simply sort of list the communal facilities that would be on offer. And in most cases, the actual delivery of that finished space was as considered as the effort made in the brochure. Now, these days, the human experience and the pronounced visualization of aspects such as health, wellness, fitness, community are now central thematic experiences and of massive importance to the developer. Now, developers are having to now, going back to an example of, say, the gym, it's no good anymore just saying this is the gym. This is the gym, and this is the exact make and brands of gym equipment that will be included in that gym. Some schemes I've seen over the last couple of months are now offering bespoke wearable health tech that integrates and links up with your apartment, the building itself. It directly communicates with your PT. We've seen an introduction in sort of the luxury area, not just having a concierge, but you having a wellness concierge who will source your PT sessions. They'll arrange your yoga sessions, your meditation, your cold plunge, all happening in the building Zen room. So it's evident to me that wellness and social well-being are now key thematic tools that developers can focus on. That's clearly trying to appeal to a younger wealth demographic that are ranking their mind, body over other variables, historic variables that might have been more important in the past. And as a result, we started seeing residential developers targeting international certifications such as WELL as a marketing tool to resonate with certain buyers. And just another point worth mentioning, which I guess is more related to the environmental side. There has been a very evident success of branded residential schemes in Dubai, and I think Dubai now boasts more branded schemes, whether in the pipeline or delivered, than any other city in the world. And by association, I guess the hospitality and the lifestyle brands want to make sure they are associated with product that's not only synonymous with quality and luxury, but also synonymous with sustainability. Good examples of that would be the new Four Seasons residence in Dubai. That's a LEED Gold certified building. The W Hotel and the W Residences on the Palm, again, another LEED Gold certified building, and both of which they've implemented to get that level of certification. Again, energy consumption systems, water efficiency plumbing, solar energy, as we've spoken about, wastewater irrigation, among other initiatives and variables that have gained that certification. And so what's clear is that these branded examples are now the norm when it comes to these types of offerings, and they are environmentally conscious builds, but they're in the luxury segment. And now we need to see this level, this sort of bleed into the mainstream residential product and more affordable product too.
Which is very, very interesting, Rich, because like you mentioned, I think once the benchmark has been set by the luxury or the top end segment, we might gradually start seeing the mid-end segment of the market kind of adopting these things as a norm rather than an exception. And we might see a collective move towards more sustainable and socially viable developments, which is very, very interesting. Now, Paula, from an office perspective, there is a lot of discussion globally around green premiums and brown discounts. I know that there are some cities in Asia where the green premiums could be as high as could be in double digits. Well, in some other markets, it could be a single digit increase, but there is definitely a green premium to be had for grade A assets. Are we seeing that trend in Dubai as well? I know that the office rentals have increased by 20-25% on average across grade A developments in DFC, but is there still scope for green assets or LEED certified assets to ask for a premium compared to the rest of the market?
I think by the nature of LEED certified buildings across our markets, they tend to be those buildings that are either new developments or grade A or super prime grade A developments that are already in our market. So they tend to demand those higher rental rates as a matter of course, because of the quality of the building rather than necessarily the certification that's attached to it. So the two do tend to go hand in hand. I wouldn't say that there is a specific uplift in rental levels associated with the certification beyond simply having that quality asset in the market. And as we said before, there's a lack of good quality supply across the UAE at the moment, and therefore those buildings that do have a LEED certification tend to demand those higher rental rates as a matter of course. I would just pick up on something, Swapnil, that Rich was saying around wellness, and I think this is an interesting trend that we have seen that perhaps moves away a bit from the building certification. But when we're working with clients who are fitting out their space, the wellness element seems to be really key in their fit out and in their design, and the integration of wellness rooms and Zen rooms, the integration of quiet spaces, collaboration areas for people to sit and work quietly together on a project or on a piece of work, and also just simple things like showers and cycle racks really kind of feed into that dynamic that Rich was talking around wellness and health of employees, and I think that that's something certainly that our clients are really focusing on in terms of incorporating that into their build out, even if the building that they're sitting in is not necessarily a formally certified building. So we are seeing that movement towards all elements of ESG, and I think that we'll continue to see that as the Dubai market matures.
That's very good. And I think we have live examples as Savills wherein we have probably advised clients on their internal wellness certification that they've seen their occupancy gradually go up from 30 to almost 70-80%. So it's interesting to see that this is actually tangible and you can measure in terms of the impact it has on your occupancy and the rental levels. But of course, there is always a cost involved. And with that, Kat, what are your thoughts globally? Who pays for this? Is it the landlord that bears all the costs for the retrofit or for building the new stuff, or is it the occupier that kind of pitches in as well? Sorry, Kat, I think you're on mute.
I think this is the question that I'm asked most frequently. Who pays for that uplift? And to pick up on the point that Paula just made, quite often the buildings that are at the higher end of the market in terms of certification are those that have a range of different facilities with them. So the end-of-trip facilities, a high-end reception. So quite often, if a landlord is upgrading a building, it will be part of a package including that. There is a bit of a debate in the background which says for other buildings that might not be in the position to make those sort of upgrades, that the tenant should pay. I think that's a point that comes across quite frequently in the residential market. I know we've talked a lot about offices here, but in the residential market, both in the UK and in Europe, the idea that the tenant pays doesn't go down very well with the tenant. And what's making this more difficult at the moment has been the cost implications associated with price rises for materials and a labour shortage. So that together has increased and put further pressure on costs for retrofitting.
Interesting. And I think, Richard, from your perspective now, even though we are blessed with a very stable government and an excellent infrastructure, but from a climate perspective, the city and the region could get really, really hot. What are some of the environmental considerations that the residential property market in the UAE has to take into account? What are some of the challenges that developers need to address to make sure that they're addressing the ESG aspect of things?
Well, as we've discussed, I mean, the UAE's made decent strides in addressing some of the environmental challenges that they're faced with, but it's an ongoing journey, and there are several hurdles to overcome. And residential property, does take on a huge amount of some of these issues. Now, first and foremost, and I think it's well documented, water scarcity. The UAE has a limited supply of fresh water. So making water conservation a critical issue is really important. Residential properties probably consume the largest amount of water in any type of built environment, real estate across the country, whether that's irrigation, cooling, and then that's linked with energy consumption. So the UAE's reliance on air conditioning, obviously, as you mentioned, it's very warm throughout the year, so there's a huge amount of energy consumption for AC. And that's only going to continue to increase as the population and it increases too, which I guess links into urban sprawl. In the 15 years I've been here, the country, but Dubai specifically, where I am, has obviously built along the coastline, but now there's a lot of urban sprawl inland, and that's increased transportation, therefore, and it's a heavily car-dependent city, so transport emissions are up too. So the idea of trying to, as I mentioned earlier, have more self-sustaining communities that limit the amount of travel time, incorporating more public transport is really, really important. And then there's waste management within these communities, residential communities too. And residential properties probably generate a significant amount of waste, if not the most. There's a lot of strain on landfill capacity. And so, we need to learn better ways to managing that. Now, a lot of that comes from community engagement and education. You need to bear in mind that, the UAE is a multicultural city of people from all over the world that have different levels of understanding of sustainability, environmental impact, and things along those lines. And so there needs to be residents need to be encouraged, and community members need to be encouraged to adopt sustainable practices. which is really important as well. But overcoming these challenges, it requires a multi-pronged approach, not just a stick from the government side, but developers, as we discussed, as I mentioned earlier, residents themselves, and and consultants like Savills. They're all going to be part of that solution going forward.
Fair enough, Rich. And touching on what Richard said, Paula, given the region's unique climatic conditions, do you think it makes sense for us to stick to some of the global certifications like LEED or BREEAM, or is it more relevant to have local certifications that take into account the local climatic conditions to green or to certify the buildings?
I think that the LEED certification is fairly well recognised, certainly amongst our international clients. I think it's something that can be benchmarked internationally, and I think that's very important. I think that having a certification which can be measured and that can be recognised globally, I think is probably the way to go. I appreciate that there are local certifications and certifications that operate across our Middle East markets, but I think that LEED certainly seems to be the most recognised and the one that people are looking to take into consideration when making their choices.
Fair enough. And just on that, given the relatively new development timescale of office buildings and real estate in the region, is it relevant to retrofit a lot of the buildings? If yes, then what are some of the challenges or opportunities of doing that from an office perspective?
Yeah, I think the primary challenge in Dubai in terms of retrofitting is that we've got quite a lot of office stock that is strata, and that does present an issue in terms of upgrading buildings. I think there are several challenges around retrofit, and I think that Luke touched on one of these earlier this morning. I think there's certainly a financial implication, and that is often borne by the landlord, as Kat mentioned, and often where you've got an older building with a lot of older MEP that needs to be removed. And significant investment to replace that, and also any new systems that are replacing that need to obviously work with the building systems that are already in place. I think one of the issues around retrofitting for tenants is around business disruption. Obviously, if the retrofitting is happening whilst they're in situ, but also being able to measure what the benefits of some of those upgrades are. What are the specific benefits, financial benefits, and operational benefits around upgrading this? And I think a lack of data and probably a lack of experience in the market to date probably limits our knowledge around that. But certainly there's an interest in retrofitting, and we've worked at Savills with a number of landlords that have done just that. But I think we're probably still early days for retrofitting stock in our markets.
Fair enough. And Luke, from your perspective, any particular sector that is more inclined towards taking up ESG compliant stock, or anything from a developer perspective when you're seeing developers or landlords actively pushing sustainable developments? Anything that you can share with us for Dubai?
Yeah, of course. So the larger zones and larger institutional landlords are the ones that are putting in that investment into ESG and green buildings. The reason for a lot of those have other stakeholders where it's a key concern. So they're the major ones, and of course, investing in their properties is only going to add to their asset values in the long run as well.
Perfect. And Kat, from your perspective, you're based out of London. You have a lot of heritage structures in London and the wider European market. What's the thought process or the discussion around retrofit? How easy is it, or how cumbersome is it because of the policy level regulations surrounding retrofit in other global markets?
Yes, I hear presentations frequently in which the speaker boasts about the UK having the whole oldest heritage building stock anywhere in the world, and then decries the ability to be able to retrofit it effectively. we have a great range of different architectural styles, and that's what makes it quite complicated, because no one approach will fit all buildings. I would like to see more retrofits. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to engage architects in more creative thinking and the way that we go forward and what those buildings look like. And I'm sat about a 10-minute walk away from a landmark case that went all the way up to the ministerial level for decision making, and has run through the media for several years, which is the Marks and Spencer's flagship store on Oxford Street, in which the developer wants to demolish and refurbish, and rebuild rather than refurbish, and that's been rejected. So I think we're seeing a shift in approach at policy level on this, but a lot of the new buildings that we're seeing have been in the pipeline for a while. COVID delayed a lot of things. So we've got this impatience, I think, with what's going on, particularly in London. And I think there are other countries that are experiencing the same issue.
Fair enough. And I think in the region, we have a completely different story where the development cycle is very, very recent. A lot of the, like I discussed in the presentation, there is still a significant amount of supply that is likely to hit the market over the next few years. Richard, you've been involved in a lot of development advisory work. What's the future of ESG when one considers residential property in the region? What are you, hearing and seeing from clients?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, in terms of the future, the region will be setting new benchmarks in terms of property development, and having ESG and green building as a core implementation of that as an initiative. And I guess one only needs to look at some of the standards that will be set by the new NEOM scheme in Saudi Arabia, and it will you get some sort of idea of the length that a developer will go to set new standards in sustainability. The line, for example, linear city, designed to be sustainable, a complete sustainable way of living. It is stated that the city will be powered totally on renewable energy, have a zero waste policy, be built using sustainable materials. The city will adopt public transport systems that are designed to offer a complete car-free solution, zero emission system, and ultimately rely on high-speed rail, trams, autonomous vehicles. Integrating things like we've discussed here, vertical farming, more sort of smart buildings and AI that monitors and improves energy use and reduction of waste and water. So these types of commitments are impressive statements, but they're not exclusive to NEOM and that sort of and Saudi Arabia. Savills are working with clients on numerous projects across the region where the environment, sustainability at the forefront of their design and offering. And in many ways, as we've kind of just alluded to, the region, it lacks probably historic built environment, but it's probably to its benefit. Dubai doesn't have to deal with huge amounts of retrofit concerns that cities like London and Paris have. The GCC offers relatively new cities of places to live and work, and as a result doesn't have those restrictions or limitations that older cities do, which means that over the next 20 years, possibly the region will not only catch up with the rest of the world in terms of its real estate and what's offering and how it encompasses ESG and green buildings into its development, but it surpasses it as well and sets new targets for the rest of the world. That may be what the future looks like.
Thank you very much for that, Rich. I think it's been a very interesting discussion on the topic. There's so much that we can discuss on it from a regulation perspective, from an occupier and from a developer perspective. And there is enough and more being done across the region. I think especially given the fact that the government here is very, very proactive when it comes to all things environment related, and hosting the COP here in Dubai is a testimony to that. So I think we will continue to see a lot more push from the government to kind of sustain the whole ESG agenda, not just in the UAE but in the wider GCC market. And we are looking at some of these trends as well as some of the regulatory concepts around ESG and the built environment in our recent report that we have put together, which should be released in a day or two time. So I would like to thank all of my panelists for today. It was very, very interesting to hear your thoughts on both global as well as regional trends across office, industrial, and the residential sector. And thank you very much to all the audience who have joined us today to hear what Savills had to say, and hopefully found the presentation as well as the webinar interesting. And please please follow up and keep in touch for the follow-up report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.